the main segment of the event today. And so we have a lot of interesting experts here today to talk about industrial and manufacturing policy and how we can take advantage of the opportunities that exist within the ecosystem, but also highlight areas where there are challenges and what needs to be changed. So this is a learning series that we're hosting at the Timbuktu Manitech Hub. This is the second one. We had one back in December on Industry 4.0, which is more academic focused programming. So to begin with, Timbuktu is a UNDP Africa program that is focusing on the tech ecosystem within the continent, primarily to catalyze investment, like private sector investment on tech startups. So what we're working on is creating an ecosystem in terms of policy, but also in terms of startup capacity and startup pipeline that can then will entice private investors to come into the continent and provide equity and investment and venture capital and so on. So this is a 10-year-long program which was launched in 2024, so we're quite in our early stages, and we have different spaces and programs across the continent. So one of those programs is what we call the thematic hubs, or which are called vertical hubs. These are sector-specific hubs that rely on a specific country's expertise within that sector. So for example, in Nigeria, we have a fintech hub. So we know Nigeria on the continent is quite advanced in terms of financial technologies, and they have also garnered a lot of investment, and we have unicorns that on the continent that are fintech based. So we have a fintech hub in the continent in Lagos, which serves all startups across Africa. So similarly, this hub is focused on manufacturing technologies here in Ethiopia. So we work with startups and provide programs for startups that are working within the manufacturing sector space. So in 2025, we had about 120 startups from 15 countries that were part of the programming in this hub. Majority of the programming does happen virtually because of everybody's distribution, but we do have residency programs where startups come to Addis for a week-long program where they have immersive educational opportunities where they interact with the ecosystem here in Ethiopia. We go on site visits, look at manufacturing technologies, but also large manufacturers in Addis, and so we're creating a space for them. So from the 120 startups, we have 50 that went into our incubation program, which is a much more longer term, like a 3-month program, where they get one-on-one mentorship and coaching, and also technical support. And then from the 50 startups, now very recently, we have our top 20, which go into our acceleration program. So the acceleration program is where there is also access to a bit of equity-free grant, about $20,000 for 20 startups. So the startups profiles that you see on different parts of this space is actually the startups that have made it into our into our acceleration program. We do also have other startups that are part of other hubs. So there are Ethiopian startups, for example, in the Kigali's Health Tech Hub. We have Ethiopian startups that were part of the FinTech Hub as well. So this space also serves those startups as a co-working space. It's also, if they would like to use our makerspace, it's also available. So the goal of this space when it comes to Ethiopia specifically is also working with the Ministry of Industry to provide the space for Ethiopian startups, to have it be this educational space where everybody can come and learn and talk about the manufacturing space, specifically when it comes to policy, but also in terms of market linkage and value chains and all the other components that are required for fruitful manufacturing ecosystem. So we hope that we will see you in other times when we're hosting other events, but we also would look to opening up the space for anybody who's interested in using the space. If you have event ideas, you want to hold events, or you want to come and use the maker space, these are all opportunities that we're looking to open up this year as we are fully set up now. So if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me afterwards as well, or any of our hub members. So without further ado, I would like to invite Bruk Yosef, who is the moderator for our panel. He is the board chairman of the Ethiopian Association of Startup Ecosystem, as well as the country director for AGGP. So Bruk, please.
Thank you very much, Dase. Good morning, everyone. Great to see everybody here. Really privileged to have been selected to moderate this panel today. Very important topic, and really distinguished panelists I have here. All of them are pretty much, capable of addressing all the questions. So we'd come at the end. We'll give you time to ask questions and everything. So please feel free to grill them, because they can handle it. Before going into all the details and everything, thank you very much. Let me just invite my panelists. I'll give them a few minutes to introduce themselves initially. So we have people from government, private sector, regional entities, and I would like to call upon Noah Halemu from Ministry of Trade and Regional Integration to the panel. Please join me in welcoming him. Next up, I'll call Harish Kotari from Mohan. He's representing private sector. He has been a distinguished manufacturer and business person in Ethiopia for a while. So please join me in welcoming him to the stage. I will call then Lulada Ibrahanu from UNITC. Should be telling us more about the regional work that they do, and also Komi Tsomu, please, UNDP Regional Office representing. And as you can see, with a diverse background and responsibilities that my panelists have, we would be focusing and discussing around, what does it take to really align manufacturing policy and innovation. And not only that, and what does it also take to go beyond the national level, performance? How do we regionally integrate and work and do businesses across borders? So that would be the theme of our discussion. And I'll take my seat and forward my questions. Right, great. So, government is very important. So we'll start with Noah Halemu here. So if you can tell us about, of course, what Modri does initially, and then we follow the role, and everybody will tell us what you do and who you represent really quickly. Then I go into the questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You can hear me, right? Thank you very much. First off, I would like to start with a congratulations. It's been 2 years since I actually came to this place to assess if it's the right fit to host Manotech. And you guys have done quite a lot in terms of actually making sure that this space is going to be helpful for startups. So congratulations on that. And second, with a correction, I'm from the Ministry of Industry. No, not the Ministry of Trade and Regional Integration. So with that, as the Ministry of Industry, basically the main priorities of the Ministry of Industry is to set policies and coordinate the right institution to make sure that enterprise development in the manufacturing space is actually going to achieve the target set by the government. Within the affiliate institutions, for example, the Manufacturing Industry Development Institute, which this space is hosted on, they focus on R&D and providing skills and training for large, medium, and small, and as well as micro enterprises. And then the second one is the Ethiopia Enterprise Development, which is a second affiliate, That is more working on a small and micro level. Similarly to the manufacturing industry development institute, they provide the skills and as well as policy recommendation for the Ministry of Industry to accelerate and make sure that all parts of the government are working in accordance with the policy. Recently, it's been actually 2 years, following the homegrown economic reform and the 10 years development plan, we've designed the first of its kind industrial policy. It's called manufacturing industry policy. The distinction from the previous policy is that it gave a narrow focus to the manufacturing industry. As based on the UNIDO classification, industries classified into manufacturing industry, the water and energy industry, construction industry, and the last one is manufacturing industry. So it shows that the government is very much committed to accelerate the manufacturing industry policy. Unless you have a dedicated policy, one thing we know in Ethiopia is you get neglected. If you are neglected, nobody can actually look after you. When you have the policy, when you have the right tools, the government will make sure that those policy commitments are actually going to be materialized. So they will bring in the relevant structures to make sure that when you go to, for example, CD administration to access a working space, when you go to financial institution for working capital, then there is that dedicated focus for this institution to provide the necessary service for enterprises. And most importantly is the manufacturing industry, and more importantly, the issue of industry is the apex, I would say, structure to make sure that all the government apparatus are focusing on the manufacturing industry development.
Great, thank you very much, Noah. I think you have addressed all my questions already. Harsh, let's come to you.
So, just to introduce myself, I'm Harsh Kothari. I'm the CEO of the Mohan Group of Companies. The Mohan Group of Companies has 7 manufacturing units and a couple of trading units. From the manufacturing, we manufacture polymer compounds, so things like polyvinyl chloride compounds, ethylene vinyl acetate compounds, color and filler master batches. All of these raw materials go to different industries, and we support around 400 industries that buy from us and make the final products. We also manufacture other downstream products. We make flip-flops. In Ethiopia, we call them Netala Chama. We make shoes. The Highlander shoes is our brand, which makes canvas shoes, leather shoes, safety shoes, sports shoes, all different types of footwear products. We also have EVA sheet manufacturing, which is sometimes used in the construction sector and various other sectors. We also have recently started our trading activities at the Dredwa Free Trade Zone, which is a government initiative in Dredwa, where we're the first company in the history of Ethiopia to start operating in a free zone in Ethiopia. So that's a bit about us. We can talk more later.
Fantastic. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Lulade Brahanu. I work with the International Trade Center. I'm the ATCMA Program Manager and AU Liaison Advisor based in Ethiopia. The ITC is the only UN entity set up to support small and medium-scale enterprises. So we work in different sectors across value chains to ensure that small and medium-scale enterprises, particularly those who are owned and run by women and youth, thrive. They can access markets and competitively participate in the global economy. The ATCMA program, which I am managing currently, is called the African Trade, Competitiveness and Market Access Program. It's a global EU Global Gateway funded program that focuses on identifying regional value chains that are competitive for the continent. What this means is that we will work to identify regional value chains that go across at least 3 regional economies or regional blocks and 5 countries. We are undertaking that assessment now, currently, and once we've identified those regional value chains, we'll support in addressing non-tariff measures and tariff barriers, including standardization to ensure that participants in those regional value chains can integrate globally, particularly accessing the EU market and trade within Africa.
Good morning. My name is Komi. I'm a UNDP Regional Advisor on AFCFTA. Allow me to just do one quick check. So how many of you here are familiar with the AFCFTA? You can just put your hands up. Okay, a few. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So, industry, manufacturing, innovation, we're discussing that. And Noor, you have told us what high-level policies are and what the government is working. And if you can say more in terms of how that is actually shaping industrialization in our country at the moment, right? From practical perspective, policies. We usually say we have beautiful policies, right, at a higher level, but practically on the ground, how is that translating into shaping what's happening on the ground?
Very good question. I think policy is about creating an enabling environment. And let me talk a little bit about the background in terms of how policies have sort of energized the private sector more in general. So the homegrown economic reform, I think that's the first kind of policy, overarching policy framework to catalyze the private sector engagement in the economy. If you remember, in the past it was agricultural-led industrialization. Now it's market-led industrialization with a focus on private sector, with a focus on private sector development. So the homegrown economic 1.0, I think, we were unfortunate to actually implement some of the policy demarcation on that document because of COVID-19 and the global supply chain disruption. At that time, the government took a knee-jerk reaction to support private enterprises in terms of rescheduling their tax payment and to some extent facilitating public finance to make sure that the private sector continues in the production space. The homegrown too is actually where we are trying to see practical changes in the private sector. And the main notable shift is the exchange rate policy reform. So if you remember, it was government-based foreign exchange regime. Now it's more market-led foreign exchange access. So that is the main sort of policy intervention that is kind of unlocking the private sector, especially in the industrial space. The reason why I'm saying that is if you look into all manufacturing industry, be it textile, be it pharmaceutical, be it leather, most of their input is imported. And that means you have to have a continuous access to foreign exchange to make sure that you keep up on production, and most importantly, you diversify. Because manufacturing industry by nature is a very dynamic space globally, and it's the most traded commodity in the world. Around 80% of global trade is manufacturing. It's still going to continue to be the main driver of global development because, as you see, the population is growing. And if you look into Africa, the population is very dynamic. You have a young population and you have a very small sort of market in terms of high-value market space. So the homegrown economic reform 2.0 and the financial reform that followed is, I think, the main sort of energizer for the private sector. Still, there is a lot to do because I think the immediate short-term impact of the foreign exchange reform is it increases cost of production for industrialists. It increases the cost of production for small and medium enterprises because most of their input is imported or imported by a trader, and then they use that imported commodity to produce whatever they're going to produce. So the foreign exchange liberalization, the immediate effect might be stressful for industrialists, but gradually it is going to allow the private sector to have access for foreign exchange, because it's not just the policy reform. It allowed private banks to operate in the space. It brought in equity financing as an alternative finance. Previously, you have limited access to finance. It's only public finance, which is the Development Bank of Ethiopia, or the commercial banks. As an industrialist, you can't really access commercial loans because they are short-term, and their interest is quite large, and they are not willing to take risk. In industry by itself, it's a risky business. It requires a long-term financing, and it requires support from government to make sure that you put that finance into something that's productive. So you need the production space, you need the skill, you need the labor, so you need a long-term finance. So with the foreign exchange, the commercial banks and as well as the public banks are restructuring their loan and credit structure. I think that's the first one. And the second is the monetary policy. So it put a cap around 50%. So that means the largest creditor or loan taker in the country, it's not the private sector, it's the government. Now with that cap, it restricted the government to take whatever available finance out there to a certain limit. So there is a threshold for the government. Because of that, it allowed private investors, manufacturers to take up the remaining finance. So that 50% monetary policy cap allows industrialists to partake in the private as well as public finance access. I think these are the two kind of major interventions at the macro level. And then structurally speaking, more specifically focusing on the manufacturing industry sector. As I mentioned earlier, the manufacturing industry policy has been endorsed by the council, and it's been implemented for now a year and a half. So what that actually helped is, as a manufacturer, you need input from the agriculture sector, right? You need finance from financiers. You need skill from universities, and you need working space from regional bureaus and as well as city administration. So with that policy, it gave the manufacturer, the Ministry of Industry, a higher authority to coordinate all these entities. As a Ministry of Industry, we have a list of institutions and enterprises, I would say, and target in terms of both import substitution, export target, to make sure that we achieve those targets. The government apparatus has to work in coordination. And we set a very strict structure in how to coordinate both the federal and regional institutions so that they commit to the policy targets. So I think these three interventions at the macro level, you have the foreign exchange and the monetary policy, and structurally the manufacturing industry policy, which gave a space for the Ministry of Industry to have an upper hand in coordinating all these relevant institutions, government institutions, to provide all the necessary input, infrastructure, working capital, and as well as working space for enterprise. This is the thing that you need as a manufacturer. You can't have everything at the same time, but gradually, if you put manufacturing at the heart of government, that means if the National Bank talks about manufacturing industry on a daily basis, if the Ministry of Agriculture prioritizes manufacturing similarly as agricultural production, if you have the Ethiopian Investment Commission trying to prioritize to bring in investors focused on manufacturing industry, then you'll be able to create the ecosystem to nurture the manufacturing enterprises in the country.
Great, thank you very much, No. Overall, to just summarize what you said, there are a couple of things that the government is working toward facilitating the growth of the industry as a sector in Ethiopia, and it starts from the high-level financial policy, access to foreign exchange, and then internally coordinating all the players to create a fluid ecosystem. So to what extent does this translate into practical terms, and what did this unlock to you is a question that I'd bring to Harsh, right? So yeah, as someone who has been in the sector for a while, these reforms, did they relate, are they poking and scratching the pertinent issues for you?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for highlighting everything so that he gets to ask a difficult question because of everything you've elaborated on. But yes, I think the reforms have been very useful for the manufacturer. From our group's experience, as a result of these policies, we have invested in two important and large-scale projects. Just because we have been very happy and we've welcomed these reforms. And this is just not us, it's also the private sector. If you ask me, the reforms actually started with the homegrown economic reforms 1 and 2, but it started with the changing of the commercial code. If you guys will remember, the commercial code that we used to use until 2017 or 2018 was the one that was published in 1960 something. And it's the first time that we changed the commercial code since the 1960s. So I think that was one big and major step that that started changing the landscape of Ethiopia. And since that was the fundamental bedrock of commercial activities, everything else that then came, all the other reforms, they were supported by this commercial code. So whether it is having a listed company by having a stock exchange, or whether it's having a liberal digital economy, or whether it's having the various reforms that have taken place, the foreign exchange reforms have been very useful because access to foreign exchange has been a lot more easier through the banking system. And accessibility in general to finance and to foreign exchange has increased drastically. But like Mo says, access to finance is very expensive, and we still feel it's expensive today. But we also believe that it's still worth it compared to the growth at which Ethiopia is moving at. So when you look at the overall growth of business, yeah, the cost at which finance comes is still manageable and affordable. But of course, lower finance costs will always make us more competitive at a global scale, and as a business person, we always want things cheaper, so we can do with lower finance costs. In addition to that, we do believe that that the entire ecosystem is well networked and well coordinated, whether it is EIC, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Industry, to the local waradas. Everybody's talking the same language, which is a big change over the last few years, and I think it's something that we really welcome and appreciate, and we encourage this to go on as time goes forward, because things will only get more complicated, and this level of coordination is it's what binds an ecosystem together, and I think the ecosystem is well binded. But I'll also go a step further, because the engagement with the private sector is also increased at a different scale. I think the government is increasing, has increased its engagement with the private sector like it was never before. There is a feedback loop, yeah, that is so persistent. We never used to get emails from public sector, from the government, on asking for feedback, yeah, anonymous feedback on Google Docs. Now we're getting emails from EIC, from the Ministry of Industry, from other departments asking for feedback. And the feedback is electronic, it's recorded, it's not just word of mouth, it's just not a meeting. It's in a very officialized manner, and we can sense that it's a genuine feedback because we see the improvements after we give the feedback. As of today, there are very few cases that are unanswered or unresolved, as long as they're genuine. And I think we must, as a private sector, we love to criticize the government. It's our hobby, and we should. But when credit is due, it's due.
Thank you very much. I mean, I would trust you because you have been in the business for a while now, and you could see the change and everything over the years. That probably would be a different context, probably for a startup or for an SME which has been around for a couple of years only, right? So they might probably only see the challenge and everything, right? But if you are someone in business for a while, you can see the change and the progress and whatnot. So with that, let me come to you, Lulade. How much, given Mohan is an established business, and your entity actually works with small and medium enterprises. So to what extent do you see this being relevant to also those level of enterprises and businesses, particularly with improving the value chain continuum, right? So big industries do not exist alone. The ecosystem will also goes in terms of, in a business language, downstream and upstream, right? So the value creation process, all the inputs and everything that needs to be coordinated. That is what facilitates, at the end of the day, productivity and efficiency so that we can be, as a nation, competitive globally. So how do you see all these policies and regionally coming new aspirations, I would call them, right, facilitating for this and catering for SMEs?
Thank you. I think that's a really good question, especially because the answer given, I don't know how big, I'm thinking it's bigger than an SME or company. So I think it's, the challenges are more palpable for small and medium scale enterprises, not just in the context of Ethiopia, but across the continent. We talk about these policies, but there's a great disconnect. Actually, very recently, I attended a presentation by an organization called Afrobiometer, where they assessed whether or not all these higher level continental instruments that we discuss on many platforms have reached the SMEs. Are they aware of them? And the results were very shocking, and I'm speaking from a continental point of view because I haven't done a similar assessment in the context of Ethiopia, and I don't want to mislead anyone. For Ethiopia, I understand that, I mean, for our economy, SMEs remain the backbone. However, we are very much volume driven, not value driven, which means that we don't really focus on value chain integration, ensuring that SMEs can participate along the production chain. That's true both in terms of manufacturing sector in general, but even when we attract investment, right? We're not oriented towards thinking about how do these big investors come and support the production base. Where do our SMEs fit in this picture? Our policies are geared towards or take into account the challenge of SMEs. This I know for a fact because even last year I was working in your position at the Ministry of Trade. So I understand that these discourses that are being had take into account SMEs. But the realities in terms of access to these infrastructures that we are speaking about, access to the finances that we discuss, they don't really cater to SMEs because our SMEs are small. They're not medium small, they're very small. So the level to which, and I will stand corrected, as a government, we think about how do we pilot initiatives that help SMEs aggregate production, aggregate the use of infrastructure, come together to access finance. The level to which we think about that at the national level, I will put maybe as a question to our co-panelists. At the regional level again, the AFCFTA, which Komi I'm sure will explain better than I will, is for me more than a trade agreement. it's something that could be used to drive industrialization. Because at the heart of the AFCFTA is the idea that we build our regional value chains. And that building of regional value chains and trading amongst them ourselves can only happen when we produce, which currently, as a continent, we're very challenged by. It's not just in the Ethiopian context that we import. At the continental level, we're importing almost all inputs. If we take, for example, of the pharma sector, ITC has undertaken a Made in Africa assessment report that looks at 415 products, and narrowed down 95 regional value chains that could be competitive. And then if you look at I'm just naming, for example, the pharmaceutical sector, we are exporting active ingredients of 0.03%. It shows that we are at the lowest level of the value chain. So in order to move up the value chain, you need participation across the nodes of the value chain. And for that, the SME has to be actively targeted, and policies, though they do take into account the SMEs, need to also think about initiatives and pilots that embrace or integrate SMEs.
Great. Thank you very much, Lubadai. Komi, I would come to you with a question and request to strengthen what Lubadai already kind of touched based on, right? So where does the African free trade area come in all this context? How could it facilitate industrialization?
Thanks very much, and interesting discussions, and always also a pleasure to talk about this regional integration, which we are all, I guess, now familiar to. Look, to put it in the context, when you look at the continent today, and I think the example you gave of pharmaceuticals, we are not producing a lot of what we, still minerals that are exported outside the continent. And if you look at the market on the continent, the market size, I think the whole population of Africa can be compared sometimes to Indian population, one country, right? And if you look at our economies first, we have most of our economies, population is very limited. We only have 4 countries that are more than 100 million. And I'm sure we all know it. Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, and DRC. Yeah, so only 4. More than 15 countries with less than 10 million population. Very, look, I guess it's acceptable population in many countries. So we see the size. So that's why I think one of the reasons, again, is we look at those AFCFTA agreement, other agreement as consolidating African market, increasing for our industrialists to be able to produce more and trade more within the continent. So first is the market size and production. Second, this morning when I was checking the tariff with one of my colleagues, currently exporting leather and coffee products from Ethiopia to Nigeria, without the FCFTA to Nigeria and to Nigeria, for instance, the rates vary between 10 and 20%. Without the FCFTA, now with the FCFTA, currently those rates that were 10% before the agreement, they are around 4% because of the gradual reduction, which means 6% in terms of reduction in terms of tariff value, which is a lot in terms of value. But then, before we can seize those opportunities, again, that's why I totally agree the FCFTA is more than trade agreement. We need to produce. If we don't produce quality products, how can we trade among ourselves? That's why I think trade and industrial policy have to come together, which I think a lot of countries like Ethiopia are doing. When you set up special economic zones, you are targeting specific markets. So you need to make sure, for instance, those products that are being processed in those zones are going to be exported under whether AFCFTA and other agreements, which few countries are doing. Now, we have so many countries on the continent now that have industrial policies. Some of them are moving, like whether Ethiopia, we have Gabon, South Africa, Kenya, to develop those integrated zones where you provide the businesses with integrated infrastructure, energy, for them to produce at reduced cost. Without being competitive, we cannot seize also those market opportunities. So the FCFTA is really here to help the continent seize those opportunities. But again, I think one thing I still want to emphasize on, it's not because we have the AFCFTA that we're going to see trade volumes increase exponentially overnight. We need to complement those trade policies and industrial policies with those actions that make our businesses competitive. A lot will be going to the MSME, how we group them to be able to trade toward those like I think ITC and others are doing. And at least we have also good products. You see the leather product, for example, in Ethiopia. They can be competitive, but one aspect will be costs, competitively. How can we trade them logistic costs? Ethiopian Airlines is doing a fantastic job with some goods, but when we talk about shipping quantities, we need maritime route as well in the conversation. So this is just to say we need kind of integrated way. The FCFT also has a specific provision on intellectual property rights, IPR. And we know with IPR on the continent, we're going to protect a lot of innovations that are coming out. Last year, we had some trainings here, and one of the entrepreneurs actually came from Zambia. I met that same guy in Lusaka a few weeks ago. He's processing tomato pastes, and I think part of the UNDP innovators, those that are thriving well. And what he's doing now, he's trying to get certification. So he shipped some of his goods now to Dubai to get international certification. With international certification, you can also trade within the continent for those countries that will recognize that. So this is also to say that the market is there, and we are seeing more and more businesses, whether large or small businesses, taking action. We need to do more to support them to be competitive. So I will just, with those examples and context, we'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Komi. Very important points, right? So an aspect of innovation and IP that is extremely important. And I believe that we are also at Timbuktu, right? So it would be mostly relevant for startups, innovative businesses who would be worried about scaling, and when they scale as well, how would they be protected, and really reap the fruits of the intellectual work and value that they have created. And I think at the end of the day, any continent, any country, any entity would only be as good as the people that it has in it. And as long as we are rewarding people who think and design innovative ideas, innovative practical things that are actually relevant to our context and are based in our ecosystem, then I think that is the key, right? At the end of the day, that's the key. We would be solving the challenge of logistics, and even in terms of finance, innovative financing would solve and cater to the challenge that Mulade mentioned, regarding SMEs and small businesses. All those things would come through innovation, and IP plays a great role here, but also the direction towards integrating all these infrastructures, logistical barriers, tariff lowering. All those things would have tremendous impact in facilitating all these things. Harsh, let me come to you and ask, in relation to SMEs, as an already established company. So if you want to work with SMEs as suppliers and everything, and if there is a few things that you would want the government to support you on, I really, really want to work with young people and all those things, but I can't because X, Y, Z. It could be, issues of risk. I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but, some of those things, are there things that you can tell us? If the X, Y, Z could be solved, I can work with SMEs. I'm happy and open doors.
You always put me on the spotlight. So look, I agree with you. There could be many SMEs that could become more compliant and we could work with them a lot more easily. But I think one of the things that I feel as a society, and I'm not only talking about Ethiopia, I'm talking about Africa, we need to acknowledge that every SME is important to everything. It's a big network chain with the butterfly effect. Simple example. Yesterday I was going to the bank, but I could not find parking. I wasted 15 minutes to find that parking. For a businessman, 15 minutes is a lot of money. It's a lot of time. Anything from a small problem like parking to finding a person who can fix my forklift or somebody who can fix my machinery as a business, not as an individual or not, that guy is a good mechanic, take him, but as a business, yeah, or some guy who can, fit some electronic part in, in one new thing that I'm trying to, yeah. These are small businesses, small capital businesses, but they need to be formalized, yeah, and they need to be incentivized. And once they are formalized, then you'll know that you can incentivize them. The problem is they're not formalized, and therefore they're not being incentivized. And when I speak to a lot of these SMEs and even corporate businesses, why do they not get formalized is the biggest question, right? The tax anxiety, yeah? People are fearful of the tax man. And that anxiety needs to be bridged over time. For corporates, we can hire lawyers, consultants, good accountants, everything. But the SMEs cannot afford accountants or good accountants. They can probably get a college degree accountant just to do the basic accounting work. Secondly, the tax laws are not consistent to accounting principles. Yeah, accounting principles are very different from the tax principles, the tax accounting principles. Those need to be bridged. Yeah, so that is one of the reasons why a lot of the SMEs or some of the smaller guys who are very resourceful, who are very clever at what they do, yeah, are not becoming formalized. And I think that is one area where we can address it as a continent, because I've seen this same trend in many other African countries. The other element, and of course our friend from who's talking about AFCFTA, we're talking about tariffs, trading, manufacturing. But I think we need to brace ourselves for something even bigger. And I don't think we're even talking about it, whether it's SMEs or whether it's corporates or whether it's government. And this topic is the concept of money. Yeah. How many of you think money is important and fundamental? Can you just raise your hands? Yeah, money as a concept in business. Yeah, all right. I'm glad many of you don't raise your hand, because the concept of money is about to evaporate. Yeah? Money was a concept that came during the Qing dynasty more than 1,000 years back. Yeah? And Genghis Khan from Mongolia proliferated the concept of money. Yeah? And the cash that we're seeing. But I think that itself is being disrupted today. And I'm starting to see the value of money going down. Now we're seeing inflation everywhere. We're talking about which currency is superior, which currency is going to be irrelevant, all those discussions. But I think there's a more underlying force where money itself is going to be irrelevant. Now when money becomes irrelevant, what happens to taxes? What happens to duties? What happens to the value of a good or trade? Yeah? I think we're about to face larger issues when we're still struggling with concepts of price, with concepts of that are connected to money. So I think we need one institution, like a think tank, that pulls away from traditional thinking in monetary terms and thinks from the point of view of value creation. So the bigger question we need to ask as Africa is, what value can we give to the world? What can we offer to the world? What do we have on the table? Is manufacturing our core competency? Is becoming the market itself our core competency? That could also be a resource sometimes. Yeah, becoming the market can also be a resource. Do we want to be producers in the value chain? Do we want to be service providers in the value chain? Do we want to be a continent that works on ensuring that goods from the US go to China smoothly across the continent without going through a twisted sea route? What is it exactly that we want? What is it that we exactly see ourselves to be? The way I'm looking at it is right now we're trying to replicate what's being done in other places, taking a mixture of things and then trying to implement it, which works to a certain extent. And it works as long as there is consistency in the global order. But as we have all seen in the last few years, as the global order changes, it is not only a political shift, it's not only a geopolitical shift. It is more of a commercial shift. Yeah, it's only being impacted in the business in the geopolitical sense, but the real shift has happened commercially. And I think we need an institution that thinks about these what-if questions. Yeah, what if the concept of money evaporates? So I think we need to focus on these so that SMEs can also grow.
Thank you very much, Harsh. I mean, you have poked a lot of things, you touched a lot of things, and you were speaking about the future, right? So, the way I understood what you have communicated, starting from the practical today things, right? So the tax issues, as a formal business establishment and everything, all the future things, right, as well. There is a concept of mega trends in the world. What is happening now? We are talking about industrialization and manutech and everything here. So Industry 4.0 basically, right? So that is also coming up. How do we also position ourselves continentally, nationally, and as an individual as well, looking forward, right? So the world is heading to a different direction, not only from the concept of money and other things, but also the way we manufacture, the way we capture value, all those things are changing. So how do we better position ourselves, young people, all those who are starting a new business, how do we enhance our capacities? All those things really matter, and that is what would give us a competitive advantage at the end of the day, and we need to prepare for that. End-to-end, from policy level to at an individual level as well. Right? That's how I understood it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, having all these conversations, it's about time to give space for a couple of people in the audience to ask if there are any questions to any of the panelists. I'll be giving you the chance now. Questions? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having this kind of platform. My name is Gohan Amarga. I work in Addis Tech Group. Question to Noh. So my question is, yeah, policies are important, very good, and it has to be there. But if policy is not implemented to get to the level where it helps the people who are working on, then it's not going to be good. So there is this slogan which came from a policy, Ethiopia Tamrit, let Ethiopia produce. But my question is, how can Ethiopia produce if the right structure is not being followed? So specifically, I'm a hardware designer, and that's at this State Group, what we do is IoT. But the problem is we're not able to import basic things. I'm talking about capacitor, resistors, which will allow us to produce. And hardware design, I don't think there is anything that we're doing here in Ethiopia that we can talk about, let alone doing it. Very interesting analogy I can take. Dr. Abiy, whenever he addresses the public, he speaks about agriculture, tourism, and other things with confidence. But he's always quiet about when it comes to hardware design, let alone exporting. And we have so many smart students, smart, young entrepreneurs who can do a lot in IoT, and everything is going to IoT nowadays. So Adistech has been ready for the last 5 years to do above and beyond. A big responsibility that you
Governor, let me ask you to go to the question.
Okay. So there is a big responsibility. We're not talking about only 100 million people, but 1.4 billion people. So how can we, Ethiopia, produce when it comes to hardware design if we're not able to import? We have to go to INSA, this and this for basic things. I'm sorry, I made it long.
All right, thank you very much.
So my name is Matthias, sorry. I came from an organization called Global Kaizen Institute. My role is the director for Africa. So we oversee supports provided to manufacturers and service sectors. So when I was listening to the descriptions, I was taken away by the possible challenge that would eventually be faced by SMEs. Okay, because when I look at the macroeconomic policy that is shifting in Ethiopia, if I may give the example of Ethiopia, that's going to bring a huge potential as well as challenge to the market, so that the small companies are expected to compete with the bigger brands that are going to come in with bigger markets as well as bigger compliance requirements. That is one big force that I see. The second one is the rate at which technologies are being innovated across the globe is another challenge or force that is coming, which might also be challenging the SMEs with regards to scaling their productivity, because before they know it, they might be already outdated with regards to the technologies. So when I look at these different factors coming from the possible competitors, the market shifting towards low cost, and the need for the SMEs to scale so that they would be able to compete, who is going to protect these chicks? Like I regard them as small chicks, and where is the hen, the mother, that is going to lead them into where they would like to go? So maybe one possibility that I foresee, maybe the panelists can reflect upon, which we have had experience with, is that for some proven markets with defined market requirements, compliance and related and cost-related requirements, programs can be created so that the SMEs could be clustered so that they can even be supported with regards to maximizing their capability to innovate, to improve the costs and all that. So where is the government thinking in this direction to protect, as well as of course make sure that the MSMEs or the innovators could also be protected, and how do we foresee this challenge being handled in a sustainable way? Thank you.
I'm Bahrit from Formation NGO from Germany. My question is very small one, and I was thinking of startups or SMEs like Crawling Baby. So my question would be directed to Noah. Who will clap or encourage this Crawling Baby to stand like Wofi Kolmach in our culture? Mothers, neighbors clap for this Crawling Baby so that he can stand. Usually we cheer this Crawling Baby like Wofi Kolmach. The bird is going to stand, then walk, then fly. So what are really the real practical incentive for this baby to stand, then walk, then fly? Because the environment matters a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Alam Kapado. I'm a startup and come from HD Inclusive HD Textile Manufacturing Company. And I am an innovator and the founder of this company last year. So I ask you two questions regarding to Ethiopian policy regarding to the manufacturing and the startup support for a policy management as well as how it will be put into the ground about the startup policy that are differentiated from normal trader or the other one. And also my second question is, what is the role of the Timbuktus as the whole of the Africa in order to interconnect with each other with regarding to free trade as well as getting access to the machinery, import and as well as their export to their materials with connect with each other. So we have hearing many last 2 days from AU as well as what about the problem of Africa as well as the whole continents of Africa and how can we benefit from the intercontinental free trade that are supporting for startup and we are ready to be hearing this. So at the finally, thank you very much for this good our panelist discussion that we are gaining many things from those talking with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alamu. The last one.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarah Siyum and I'm an SME that manufactures lampshades, which is an import substitute in Ethiopia, who have been told several times that manufacturing lampshade in Ethiopia is going to be very difficult, capital intensive, it's impossible, import is better, and so, hundreds of thousands of rejections. But I've been crawling for the past 7 years to actually make it the opposite, to make it where I need to be. And right now, I have seen AFCFTA and the relationship between Africa trades and to import, export, use African products within Africa. But when it comes to manufacturing, it needs scale and mass productivity capacity, which is to produce one product, you need 3 phases: raw material, end product, and ongoing production. So when we talk about AFCFTA, which I am so happy about it, I've been in the process as well, but what it takes is we are the lost souls, the lost sheep, because we're not too big to actually go forward, we're not too small to actually stop trying. So how does it, the AFCFTA tries to combine these not small, not big SMEs, capable or not capable SMEs, and then how does it work when it comes to manufacturing and exporting and fulfilling the local market as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Funny enough, your question reminded me of Michael Jackson's song, actually. Too small to go under, too big to, like, so stuck in the middle, and the pain is thunder, that kind of, it goes like that. So I feel you. Usually we call it the missing middle, right? So who is catering for that and all. So a number of questions. Some of them probably I would touch base on those if I see some needs there, particularly related to the startup policies and other things. I may touch base on those as well. But let's start with a question from Gobana, the design manufacturing related question. And quite a number of them were directed to Noor. So let's come to you.
Okay. The perks of representing government. Okay. I think there are several questions directed to the Ministry of Industry. But let me try with the sensitive one, incentive, right? So as Ministry of Industry, the manufacturing space, the industry space is very much dependent on import. Not just for raw material, but also for intermediate goods. So second, when it comes to the overall consumer goods in Ethiopia, if you look into the portfolio, large volume of our consumer goods are very much imported, including food items. So what we did was, starting 2022, was we need to have a conscious intervention around supporting import substituting industries. And so one thing I need to clarify is there is within government there is a lot of hand-holding, I'd say, deprioritization in terms of one's priority might not necessarily be a priority for the other. So what we did was we discussed with the Council of Ministers to develop an import substitution strategy. One of the things that we wanted to convince was the shift from developmental state to market-led state requires not only focusing on export, because in the previous time it was heavily on export and FDI. Now it's a balanced sort of view. So the government is looking into both export promotion as well as import substitution. So what we did around that is we identified around 96 import substituting commodities in terms of competitiveness, and technology in electronics is one of them. So what we have done since endorsing the strategy last year is the Ministry of Finance asked us to actually specify the list of commodities that are heavily import dependent to have an exemption. Some of them, luckily, they've went through the discussion, because there's another side of the government that you have to consider. Especially for African countries, the main struggle with the AFCFTA is the majority of their income comes from trade tax. Around, I'd say, Ethiopia is around 40% of its government revenue is generated from import tax. So unless, as a ministry, you come up with a proposal and how the government, one, needs to kind of take an opportunity and take a risk in terms of allowing some commodities to be tax, I wouldn't say tax-free, I would say with a lesser customs duty, with more about creating an enabling environment. I think that's more of the direction that the Ministry of Industry and the government is following. So we've been successful in some commodities. For example, pulp is one area, metal commodities is also another area. But unfortunately, in electronics, still the discussion is up. And unfortunately, to some extent, the Ministry of Finance is still considering reducing tax in some commodities because of the IMF agreement and the implication around credit, in terms of how much the economy has loaned from these big banks. So I think that's how I would respond to this question. Second is in terms of implementation. So yes, we have policies, yes, we have strategies, but do we have the structure to implement it? So talking about the Ministry of Industry, we have 14 regional states and 2 city administration. And we only have Warada level bureaus in 8 of them. So this is something that the Ministry of Industry cannot handle by itself, because it's a federal structure. The regional bureaus have their own priorities. So at some regions it's only agriculture, in some regions it's only tourism, in some regions it's neither of these two, it might be trade. For example, if you go to the Somali region, it's more about trade facilitation. So that is still something that the government, the Ministry of Industry, is really pushing through the Ethiopia Tamret movement. So I think one of the things that we have to be clear is all government don't understand manufacturing the same way. And Ministry of Industry and the Prime Minister Office really understands the role of the manufacturing industry in Ethiopia. In the last 20 years, we've made tremendous progress in terms of GDP, economic growth, but that actually has not materialized into structural transformation. So what that means is, yes, you have a double-digit economy, yes, you have income as a nation, but labor is still in the low-value sector. It's in the agriculture sector. And it's a bit somehow expanding to the service sector. And economy with the 120 million population, you can't really make a structural transformation unless you work on the manufacturing industry. So the second point is, through the Ethiopia Tamret movement, we're trying to establish all these relevant structures, bureaucracy, so that small and medium enterprises can actually talk to officials in their region and secure the government services that they need to. And finance, as you mentioned, is the last thing. If you have the skills, if you have the innovation, if you have the linkage the large industries can give you the finance for you to produce their input or the raw material. And then the third point I would say is in terms of innovation.
Is it going to be the last as well?
I hope so. So the last one is about innovation. So if you look into global research and development data, 53% of R&D goes to manufacturing sector. That's how the South Koreans have made the impossible. That's how Asia, the Chinese, have actually achieved this tremendous export and manufacturing, production, development. And unfortunately in Africa, unfortunately in Ethiopia, that is still work in progress. If you look into the data, I think the Africa Union commitment is to pledge or to commit 1% of their GDP to R&D. Unfortunately, the Ethiopian figure has reduced from 0.3% to 0.2%. So that tells a lot in terms of commitment when it comes to government. But one thing we're trying to do as Ministry of Industry is following the import substitution strategy and also the manufacturing industry policy is the university industry linkage proclamation. We have a practice, very fragmented, very small scale, in terms of testing, piloting, enterprise level innovation and marketing with university, because educational institutions play a key role in the R&D space, especially in Ethiopia where the private sector is, I would say, handful, and there is very limited commitment or even intention to spend on R&D. Of course, we know why. That's why the public universities and private universities will play a big role in this space. So I think last year, 2025, we have the University Industry Proclamation up and running. We also have a project within the industry on select enterprises, selected sectors, to roll out that proclamation to a practical prototype development, market development, and most importantly on innovation.
Great. Thank you very much, Noah. So I will pause here for a moment because we also have in the house now our guest of honor, Ms. Ahuna Izankoa, the UN Assistant Secretary General. And because she would also have to go to a next important session, let me give a moment to say a few words and then we'll continue. Yeah? Ms. Ahuna. All right, perfect then. All right. In that case, we can continue and wrap up. Then we have a few questions, right, already dangling in the air. So how really practically could the Africa Free Trade Area really translate to MSMEs is one question, and I want Boz, Komi, and Luladai to tag team on this question.
Great, thank you, and welcome again, Regional Director. As we said, the AFCFTA is providing that enabling environment for the continent to trade more, what we call so. But what we realize, and then I think is important, is for small to medium-sized businesses, there is a need for deliberate support. That's why UNDP, again under the leadership of our regional director over the past 4 years, have created several solutions. One specifically dedicated to women entrepreneurs, what we call RFCFTA, where we are supporting women entrepreneurs, for example, on trade program market access. And over the past 2 years, I think Ethiopia, for example, UNDP Ethiopia, has provided that support a number of women entrepreneurs, first, to comply with the AFCFTA rules and regulations. Second, to also identify some of the businesses that have capacity to scale, and those businesses benefit from market access program, because you need to see when the markets are. Some of them, I know they have now been able to export to Algeria because of those past interactions with Algerian buyers. South Africa, Kenya, and Rwanda, for instance. So there are several programs, but we also need to scale, I think. And solution, maybe you can also discuss with some of the colleagues from the UNDP Ethiopia who will give you more. Second program, I think there is a question of how do we also provide tailored support to businesses depending on where they are. I think, for instance, again, from UNDP, Timbuktu program is supporting, for example, innovators, which I think, and some of them, as I told you, they benefited from a program next year. I went to meet some of them in Lusaka. They're already getting certification to be able to export some of their programs. IP, intellectual property right, is helping some of them also to protect their innovation. There are also other programs for those businesses that are ready to trade, and so and so. So we need indeed to strategize and dedicate specific program, which I'm sure ITC also will speak to entrepreneurs depending on the level. And the last example I want to also give is the discussion between how do we connect small businesses to large corporates. And at UNDP, there is also a program we call Supplier Development Program, where specifically we train, support SMEs to comply with the requirement of large corporates. And the program that has been implemented, for example, in Botswana, in Zambia, with, for instance, some of the large companies like ShopRite, and now we have small businesses supplying ShopRite as part of those specific examples. And there are a lot also in Ethiopia and other countries, which I think we can discuss further, but maybe open, calling ITC colleagues also to respond to questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kwame. I think the SME challenge and depicting the SMEs as the struggling enterprises. So I think there's a reality to confront there, but I also believe we need to change our own perspective. SMEs make up a large percentage of our economy. The way SMEs are viewed in African economies versus how they're viewed in Europe tells you all the stories that you need to know. Our SMEs actually, despite the lack of support that they get at the national level, as my sister said earlier, thrive against odds. So if we were to support them a little further, we'd go really far. And to support them a little further and to design policies that recognize their role in the economy, our own perspective needs to change. And that's from the perspective of even the government, right? I was speaking to earlier about when we are attracting investment, to what extent do we think about how these investors not just come invest and produce, but to what extent they could lift up producers, suppliers already in the ecosystem. To what extent are incentive schemes designed to ensure that these SMEs can participate? Because there's a lot that was said earlier, rightly so, about the incentive to formalize your business. And incentive structures that are geared towards ensuring that SMEs move from informal to formal is one note of that. Earlier, a question was asked on compliance being an issue. From the AFCFTA perspective, we talk about the tariff liberalization, but a big bulk of the AFCFTA also deals with non-tariff barriers. So harmonization of standards, trade facilitation, designing rules of origin or agreeing on rules of origin that ensure that they're relaxed enough so that accumulation is allowed. You could source from different parts of the continent and still qualify as originating from an African country to gain the privileges. All these things are also dealt with under the AFCFTA. In terms of programs that could be designed to support SMEs, we've talked about the policy end, but organizations such as UNDP and indeed ITC as well, the International Trade Center, that's our bread and butter. We design programs to ensure that SMEs, especially women-owned and youth-led SMEs, have access to information, can tap into finance, can link with buyers from a within the continent, and most importantly, because without that, you can't move your products and services across borders, they meet the requirements of other buyers. So we support with the harmonization and compliance aspect as well. So I think it all starts with a change in our perspective.
Perfect, great. I think those were most of the questions. And in relation to startups and innovative businesses, including what Timbuktu does here as well, bringing innovative people and businesses with innovative money-take ideas coming together from all over Africa to one hub, knowing one another, interacting with one another, building together, right? So we have 10 centers like this across Africa specializing on specific sector. And it starts there. I believe it starts, I don't want to be political, but we know more about the US and India because of Nollywood and Hollywood, right? So starting from knowing about one another, about our neighboring countries, learning languages and all those social elements, it starts from human element. And once we start knowing one another, then the business will follow naturally and organically. I also come from an organization that puts young people from across the different countries together to build businesses. And you can see an Ethiopian young engineer building a manufacturing company in Rwanda actually. And then also a Kenyan young innovator building a manufacturing company here in Ethiopia that actually produces plant-based dairy products. So you can see all these networking and crossbreeding and everything. And that starts from, of course, lowering travel costs and all those visa issues and everything. But what Timbuktu is trying to do, and organizations of myself as well are doing, will facilitate for that. And from policy perspective, what the startup law in Ethiopia recently enacted actually gives all the privileges to anyone from the continent, same as an Ethiopian startup. And we hope to see same kind of laws and policies across the continent as well, right? So you can come here, you can have a startup visa, you can have all benefits, tax breaks and everything that facilitates for the betterment and implementation of the African free trade commerce and all other regional integrations. Without further ado, if I would just give everyone 3 years from now, perfect case scenario, right? 3 to 5 years, what do you see? What do you see? Just to remind you, our theme for today, manufacturing policy, innovation, and regional integration around this. 30 seconds each. We can start from here.
3 to 5 years from now, of course, for me, I see more integrated African market where we see a lot of our entrepreneurs getting into shipping more of what we consume. Thank you.
3 to 5 years is very short to medium term. So it's hard to think of a utopia in 3 to 5 years. I would hope in 3 to 5 years we're able to identify 2 or 3 value chains that we can all work around, and think about how the manufacturers can export using inputs from within Africa, and we can tap into both intra-Africa trade and global trade as well.
I hope for 3 things in the next 3 to 5 years, and this is what I envisage. One, let us hope that the African private sector as a continent continues to develop its reputation to be a credible private sector, so that the world is happy to deal with Africa and trust Africa. The second thing I hope is that the AFCFTA actually works, and a lot of focus is given to trade, Because when there is trade, the industry will follow because you need the market before the manufacturing. And the third that I look forward for is innovation. A perspective of innovation is not so difficult. You know, when Louis Vuitton became a big brand because it innovated round bags to square bags. Sometimes we overthink of innovation, and sometimes if we try to innovate the simpler things, then I think we will be a very successful continent.
Okay, three things I think you mentioned the last one, but I'll try to have a different view. So innovation, because that's critical. We have different policies, proclamations, and then what I would envisage in the next 5 years is we have Google, Facebook coming out of this industry-university collaboration, and we have big companies, for example, Widrock, working in a specific space, allowing SMEs to develop that idea. So that is the first one. The second one is domestic supply chain. I think we should not forget that for Africa to integrate, a country itself needs to integrate. So we can't have an economy where you have large part of your inputs and raw material directly sourced from abroad. That's not sustainable, and we've seen because of the global geopolitics and of course the supply chain disruption, which still takes time to come into a regular pattern. We need a large number of SMEs producing those raw materials and those inputs locally, so that we have the large investors providing all the necessary skills and technology for them to flourish. And the last one is, we have, I think, 9 commodities in the FCFTA platform from Ethiopia. I would see that growing into 50 and plus, realistically speaking.
Fantastic. All the, yes, absolutely. And you all say, let's align on priorities, innovate, right, solutions, and then commit to action and realize the Africa, the essence and the underlying goal of the Africa Free Trade area. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Your Excellency, thank you for giving us time to wrap this up, and now I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be able to join you today. I think this is a bit loud. I'll use this one, yeah? And thank you to the panelists, I think, for the bits that I heard. It was quite inspiring and stimulating. And very well coordinated by our moderator here. It's wonderful to see this space in use, actually. So I want to also recognize the UNDP team who are behind the scenes organizing this. As I was sitting here and listening, I started to imagine a virtual space where we can connect all our ecosystem around manufacturing in Africa. You know, so my first thing is, can we make this a possibility to stream the conversations so that we also bring in voices from other and experiences from other African countries, because this is Pan-African in nature. So this is to the organizers, that the next conversation you can imagine putting it in a room where it's possible to bring voices from other parts and have this exchange of views and experiences. Some of the issues that surfaced here, I'm sure that other countries, other startups and innovators and SMEs are experiencing the same. It would be good to start thinking through, how do we exchange, what are we learning from different places, what are the experiences of other people, and how can we go together on this. We've just come from launching the AI Unipod at the AI Institute. And you start to see actually not just the potential, the possibility of what technology could do to transform this space. And I think the arrival of Timbuktu, and in this case the Manutech Hub, comes at a very good time, because it's a time where we're seeing a convergence of enablers. So one is technology. Imagine technology-powered manufacturing. You know, Africa is probably the first region to experience manufacturing at a time that we have the abundance of technology and digitalization, including AI. When many other countries went through their industrialization, they didn't have AI. They had some technology, but not as much as we have now. So imagine all of you here, if you were to actually factor in the significance of where we are as a continent with this important addition to the space. Imagine how faster we could go, but also bigger that we could go if we crowd in technology. And I'm really pleased that Ethiopia is one of the countries that's taking technology seriously and digitalization. You know, if anything, if what we saw at the AI Institute is anything to go by, I think you are in for a really exciting ride. Why? Because governments are important in this space. It's not possible to just leave this to private sector. We need the regulations, but also we need the investments by the public sector. And the investment that the government is making through the Ministry of Industry in this space is one that we shouldn't take for granted. It's a foundation for really launching innovation in a meaningful way. So I want to also recognize that. The third is the fact that we have so many young people on this continent, much more educated, much more connected, much more enlightened, but also very committed to finding solutions to Africa's development challenges. That's why we launched Timbuktu. In UNDP, we saw this seed that started to grow during COVID in young people who have woken up their conscience that they matter to what happens in their countries and to the future. They're also technologically savvy, and so we want to make sure that we seize this space and invest in this talent. The talent is not automatic, it has to be built. So centers such as this one will be a space to start to harness opportunity, to deepen the skills, to broaden the learning, to bring in mentorship, to build relationships for you. You know, relationships are more important than money. You know, sometimes when you're in business, you think, or when you're a startup, you think, I need finance, I need finance, I need finance. I think some of you have been through the journey would understand that finance is important, but sometimes it's not the most important. There are some things that are more important than money. Agree? Such as relationships, networks, and that's sort of linked to relationships. Your relationship with a lawyer, your relationship with an accountant, your relationship with a government official, your relationship with a business tycoon, somebody who believes in you and who is going to help you crowd in, hold your hand, and help you crowd in all the support that you need. It's really important that our Timbuktu journey factors in this centrality of helping you cultivate the relationships you need to succeed. It's a value chain across the board, that we don't just focus on grants and financing, because at the end of the day, you need end-to-end support. You need that hand-holding until you make it. This is why we have huge failure in so what they call a valley of death for startups or businesses, because that firm hand that holds you when you're going through the tunnel is not always there. So we don't want to make this a one-off. We want to really deepen the ecosystem so the relationships are birthed in these kinds of spaces. And you can continue to nurture those relationships and trust. Trust is so important even for money. You know, when people trust, believe, and you feel that you have integrity, they can do anything for you. The same with partners that we work with. So cultivating through these kinds of conversations, the trust, that people can look in your eyes and know that you mean business, that you are dedicated, even if you are not yet succeeding. Know that you are invested in what you want to achieve. And that's what we want to showcase to governments as well, that need to support you, especially around policy. Today you're talking about policy. We want governments to showcase the talent so that governments are inspired to say we want to do our best on the policy side to stimulate this growth rather than strangulate it. Because sometimes policy and regulations kill the spirit. They don't actually liberate. You think you're making money, you're collecting taxes, but you end up actually squashing innovation. So how can we have a policy space that recognizes the importance of regulation that supports and promotes innovation, not one that kills it? And I think the conversation should really continue to focus on that. Create that inspiration, show what is possible, and continue to indicate and insist on the role of policy in liberating that spirit of success and of innovation. Innovation is a central part here. In Africa today, there are so many things we lack. Infrastructure, energy, this, that, and the other, but also there are so many things we have. And with Timbuktu, we want to enter the world not with what we lack, but with what we have. And what we have, as you can begin to see, is a lot of talented people. So we want to invest in that. And I just want to encourage you. Manufacturing, for me, we weren't thinking of a manufacturing hub. Is there another manufacturing tech hub anywhere in Africa? I haven't heard of any other, actually. I think we may be the first. And it's a continent that is not yet industrialized. Some people think we might skip the age of industrialization. We can't skip it. But we can industrialize differently, right? And that's why this tech hub is important, because you're going to innovate industrialization and manufacturing in a way that no other part of the world has done, because you have much more at your disposal. So let's use this tech hub really to tell a new story on the continent. A story about dignity, about Africa owning its destiny, and being able to not only manufacture what it needs, but go to a made in Africa narrative. This continent has suffered from everything coming from outside. And we can start a journey of made in Africa, because they say in another 10, 20 years, the world will be wearing Africa, eating Africa, dressing, Africa, will be perhaps even driving Africa, because we will constitute a quarter of the world's workforce. So the potential is huge, and we have not even touched our critical minerals, where if we start to add value to those, this value addition, and then of course the market, the Africa Continental Market, Free Trade Area, which has been birthed at the same time as we're talking about all of this. And we at UNDP want to make sure that that market is not just for the few who have and can have access. And we are going to use initiatives like Timbuktu to broaden access to the market, because it's now the largest regional market in the world. And again, member states have to understand the importance of implementing this by having the right protocols and the right inclusive approaches that make sure that African businesses are able to cross borders. During this summit, we were also talking about free movement. We're talking about startup visas, We're talking about reducing the barrier of entry for many of the small, medium enterprises so that they can also cross borders without too much pain. Because the African market is beyond just one country, it's huge. And we need to liberate it as well. But it's possible to do all of this. Access to market is very important. One of the thoughts coming to me today, we have UNDP, for instance. UNDP has a huge program in this country. And Sam, our res rep here, was just telling me how, there's a plan because we have a DDR program up in the north. We have one of our startups, I don't know if they're here, who is making the bamboo bikes. Are they here? From the manufacturer. Okay. Attending the business forum. Through our DDR program, we can procure those bamboo bikes for the programming on the ground. If we begin to think like this, because by giving that business to that company, they have a bigger chance to scale. And when UNDP puts its trust and its brand on a particular business, we have a chance of attracting others, because it shows this is a business you have to take seriously. So we're thinking also, let's charity begin at home, and we begin to show seriousness and respect for the startups that are coming up by procuring their products. That will be the biggest validation, so that you are able to go from product to market much quicker. Because this is, again, at the end of the day, it's about expanding opportunity, people being able to create jobs and to scale their businesses. Everybody wins if we do that. So I want to challenge you to see this as your space to own, to improve, to expand, and to advocate for, to go out there and amplify the message. Because I think the future is right here now. Thank you very much, and all the best.